Welcome to Built Together, the podcast where design, technology, and leadership meet to shape the spaces where we work, learn, and connect in. In every episode, you'll hear from architects, engineers, technologists, and innovators who are breaking down the silos and rethinking how we create spaces that truly bring people together. Because great spaces aren't just about the plans or the tech, they're about the people. And it's what's possible when we build together. Thank you, and welcome to Build Together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Built Together. This is a show where we explore how technology, leadership, infrastructure, and all of those things come together to shape the industries that move our world forward. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about pro sports. Pro sports used to be about instinct, and now it's all about information. You got wearable sensors, you got biometric tracking, and then you have all the analytics dashboards that have to help teams make decisions. The question is no longer whether technology matters. The question is, does it bring teams together? Or is it quietly creating new silos inside of organizations that are supposed to be aligned? Today, I am joined by none other than Danny Davis. Danny Davis is the founder of Recon Sports and a former member of the United States military. Danny, before we talk tech, I want to talk discipline, mission, and alignment. I want to get to know you. I want to get to know your story. So if you can, Danny, take some time to introduce yourself and kind of take me back to, the story before Recon Sports or before all of the tech. What kind of shaped you early on?
Absolutely. Well, super happy to be here. Been looking forward to this. Danny Davis was a football player at first. I had dreams of going to the NFL when I was a kid and played D1 sports and football in particular. So playing football really shaped who I was as an individual. I came from a military family. My dad played football at West Point. Two uncles played there as well. So that was kind of in our blood, and I was on the path to go to be a West Point cadet probably before I even knew it. So I,
Yeah.
I was in high school, played football, and was a all-state linebacker, all-state fullback. Went to the United States Military Academy. My first year was in 2014. That was actually Coach Monken's first year. And if for any Army football fans out there, before Coach Monken, Army football was on a bad path. I think like 13 straight losses to Navy, and Coach Monken came in here there and really turned it around. And it really, it was unique to see him come in and quite literally rip a culture up from the roots and plant his own seeds in there. So that was the football background, and then the cadet background. I studied systems engineering there. West Point was a unique experience. It's easy for me to sit in this chair right now and think back and kind of laugh at it, but that is not the feeling when I was sitting in a chair. What felt like a long gray prison for 4 years. It was it was a unique experience to say the least.
Awesome. Awesome. And, serving in the military. So you and I actually have a lot in common. Well, I'll say from the younger story, not so much the actual active military and attending West Point, but I'm a military brat myself. My father was a U.S. Marine, and I can tell you that that discipline mentality sticks with you throughout your life. It's not just while you're enlisted, it kind of carries throughout. And I also play football. So I played cornerback, a kickoff return, punt return. I was a smaller guy, so I just kind of used my speed to get shifty around the field. But those two things actually have quite a few parallels, right? I think that in the military, when information doesn't flow clearly, the consequences are real, and the stakes of sports are a little bit different, but alignment still determines those outcomes, right? Like it's all of the information taking in. I think with football, I would say for me, especially as a corner, it was like, okay, read the offense. How well did I study film? How well do I know their formations? Do I know what this receiver is planning on doing if this quarterback calls out there, right? There's all these different things, all this different data that you have to take in on the field. But then your coaches, I think, are taking in way more information, right? Way more data in order to understand how to call those plays and how to make effective, calls on the field. And so what parallels do you see between the military and like high performing teams?
I think it's the discipline is definitely the big priority and a big component. But I also think when it comes down to the individual level, being able to be elite problem solvers on top of having elite discipline. If you can solve a problem if you kind of have a mentality that, hey, no one's coming to save me, no one's coming to help me. I need to, for lack of a better term, pull myself up by the bootstraps and figure it out. When you have that kind of mentality and now you're in a team structure to where there's structure around it, there's standard operating procedures around it. We're not all just pointing in a different direction. I had a battalion commander, he said to us one day, which really stuck to me, is his role, his job, the battalion commander was everyone's boss there, and it was his job to kind of point the direction that everyone was going, right? But within that big arrow, everyone has their own little vector. And if everyone's pointing a different direction, we are not going to go forward. Everyone from their own standpoint, whatever their role is, wherever they are on that map, that battlefield, the field, the operating room, you need to be pointing in that same direction because that's how you're going to go forward. And that really stuck with me, and I think that's what high performing teams do. The New England Patriots do your job. You're there to do a job. You're there to take your unique skill set, your unique ability to see the world, what's your perspective, and now bring value to that organization and what they're trying to accomplish, whether it's wins and losses on game day, whether it's the Army, whether it's a military, whether it's training, whether it's live action. High performing teams, that collaboration mixed with individuals that are highly disciplined and have unique problem solving abilities. I mean, that's the recipe for any successful high performing team, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. And I think there was one, I don't know if it was a conversation you and I had, or maybe it was a conversation that I saw, but I think that like what that kind of shapes up to be, if I can put it, would you say like talent, would you say winning is more about talent? I mean, you've been on winning teams, right? You've been on high performing teams as well. So would you say those teams were high performing or winners because of the talent, or was it more of like the clarity of the mission?
It's I think it's 50-50. I mean, you can have, if it's tilted in one way or the other, you're not going to be successful. You obviously need the right people in there that can do the job,
Right.
but they need to be disciplined in a way that's pulling them forward in a team unit, and they're for the team, they're not for themselves. I think, without having any discipline and without having cohesion and an operating system around talent is not going to reach its full potential. But if you don't
Gotcha.
have enough talent, just having structure, everything, it can only take you so far. The great teams, the great performing teams, from what I've seen, they really get both of those two components right. How do we get the right people in here that have the attributes of what we've seen work, of what we think is going to work? And then once they're here, how do we put them in a system to develop them? How do we put a discipline structure around it to make sure that they are all moving in the direction that we need them to move?
Sure. Yeah. And I kind of asked that question about the clarity of the mission because I think that kind of ties into Recon Sports, right? And at what moment did you look at the sports ecosystem and think, there's something about this that just isn't being built correctly? So, like, you know what I mean? Like, were you thinking of Recon Sports as more of a business opportunity or a bit of a mission gap, right? Where teams may not have been set up to effectively use data to put their team in a winning position.
My story is a little unique on how Recon got going and how I entered into the college world. When I was in the military after I graduated West Point, you have to serve 5 years as an officer. And I knew after that 5 year period, I was going to leave the Army. So at the time, my mission was, hey, how can I upskill myself on getting the best job possible when I leave the Army? I always loved data, I always loved sports. So I started volunteering at local high school teams just to have a practical exercise that I was motivated about and it didn't feel like learning, and I was learning so much. And in addition to that, while I was in the Army is a very manual process. For example, I remember being handed a binder that's about 3 inches thick of parts of equipment, about $14 million that I'm responsible for. And I have to sign out to my soldiers, and just a nightmare. So I basically built a digital process around that to help myself. So it was really trying to upskill myself in the early days. I turned Recon Sports into a little business for high school football teams. But when I got out of the Army and stepped into football or into Recon full time, a top university in the SEC reached out to me and they were like, hey, We see what you're doing with the high school analytics. We love that. You know football. We think you can come do this. But we also see your background on the military and not just the discipline aspect, but how you're taking systems, building systems within a closed structure. We want you to basically combine that and come build something for us under Recon because they had so many silos of data and then silos within those silos that nothing could kind of integrate all of them together. And the ones that could, you were operating in an external operating system. The main difference between Recon is this is an all internal database, all internal system, when the university is leveraging the licenses that they're already paying for. So that was once I kind of got my feet wet and got into it and started looking outside of that one school, it was when I really saw the problem of, wow, this is, as a fan, you'd like to think college football teams are maybe operating like NFL football teams and they have insane data departments and they're doing everything the right way. They're living like it's 2025, 2026. That's just not the case because they'd lack the resources of how to compile all of the data and all of the external sources like the SaaS models. People are starting to kind of get away from that and they want something built within their own organization that they see a path to, they own themselves, they can run themselves, and it works how they expect it to.
Yeah, I mean, we see that challenge even at the pro sports level, even at the NFL level. You have these teams that have data engineers. They may have the talent and the workforce, but the data and the information is still very much siloed, right? And that's kind of like what our technology at T1B, where we come into play, is because we help teams kind of bring all of that data, all of that information into one interactive space that helps teams collaborate in real time, right? And then make those decisions a little bit faster. I think that with sports moving from like the instinct era to the data driven era, it's understanding now you have all of these different components, all of these different data feeding tools. You got, your wearables, your biometric sensors and all of that, and it's like, okay, I have all of this data. Now, what do I do with it, right? So a part of me feels like it's still in some ways kind of instinct driven, even with the data that's being delivered, because there's some instinct and some finesse and some skill that kind of goes in. Okay, well, I'm going to make this decision based off the data that I have in front of me. And I wonder, like, do you feel like that's progress, or is that more of like a still a dependence on purely instinct, and our team's collecting too much information when it comes to the data?
I think there's a lot of noise out there, and we're in this kind of technology boom in the sports world. If you were to look at what companies are, how much investment dollars are going to sports-centric companies, there's a race to get there. That means there's a lot of noise, and teams are having a hard time without the right structures in place to sift through that noise. But another key problem that I think that they run into is if you go back to the military aspect, you change jobs when someone is coming in to replace your job for good, bad, or indifferent. Very rarely is it just like you leave and the new person comes in. They do what's called a left seat, right seat for like 2 to 3 weeks, ideally, to where the person coming in is literally coming in and sitting next to you, seeing how you're operating. You're handing over your products to them. You're making sure that there's no lapse between when one person leaves to the other person comes in. That is not the case in sports at any level. When a staff gets fired, when a strength conditioning coach leaves, when a player personnel guy goes to a different school or whatever it may be, there's no left seat, right seat with the person that's coming in to replace him. So basically, everything that person did on his own Excel, on his own OneDrives, on everywhere, it's not being handed over to the next person. That next person has to come in and basically start from scratch. So as a university, you're basically losing so much institutional value from one person leaving because it's not being handed over to the person that came in. Now they have to run their own structure, their own basic SOPs, and it gets messy really fast. And that's how you almost they can't communicate with data because there's no real structure to communicate the data. So they just default to the old school way, which is just verbally communicating, gut feeling, instinct, which gets the job done. But if you're competing with a team that knows how to utilize data, how to put data, how when they're in the room, they're not just talking, but they have a really big screen TV1 TV with all of the data on there, looking at it, communicating. It's you're just not going to be able to compete here in the next decade or two if you're stuck in 2005 while other teams are operating like it's current day with all the technology that's available right now.
I mean, just think of how powerful it is for a team to have a platform like yours, maybe a collaboration platform like T1B and Think Hub and kind of what we do in pro sports, which is kind of exactly what you said when you talk about that left seat, right seat, the ability to save sentiment of different decisions that are being made and why those decisions are being made, and those collaborative environments actually being stored to be brought back later at a later time. I think when I think about kind of what happens in pro sports today, I feel like a lot of it is almost like the challenge that integrators kind of ran into in our industry, like the AV industry. Integrators ran into with the engineers, with the engineering workforce. They had one really well-versed, tenured senior engineer that knew every device in and out, but he had his certain devices that he or she had their certain devices that they would work with, and they kind of that's what their go-to was. But they had all the institutional knowledge, and the moment that that senior person leaves, retires, goes to another company, no one else in the organization knows how to kind of operate at that same capacity, and it's because the knowledge transfer wasn't done. Sometimes those individuals don't feel like they'll ever leave, and then the organization is left with a gap. I've seen it happen in integration firms. I've seen it happen in government applications where you got a large government entity like a court or a county, and they have one really wizard person who knows Crestron really well, and then that person is gone, and they built out $20 million worth of Crestron systems, and the new person only understands QSC, right? Like there's all these different things that kind of have to happen, but having platforms that can kind of save a lot of that sentiment, I think, makes teams more powerful. And again, that competitive advantage today. I don't, and I've talked to teams and actually had this conversation, and I've asked them like, okay, what do you feel like competitive advantage is? And they've mentioned that, competitive advantage today isn't having more data, it's having everyone in the room looking at the same data and understanding what to do or what decisions to make based off that data. And so I kind of want to ask you a question too around like if two teams have the same like tech stack, right? Where there's analytics, wearables. Why does one team win, and another team kind of may not win in that type of scenario?
I think it's two things, and if you look at Indiana and how they operated this past year with, I think, 0 5-star recruits, the majority of them were all 3-star recruits.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, if you have two teams, all the same tech stacks, it's not just having the equipment that counts. It's really two fronts right now. It's the player personnel and the front office figuring out who they need in the building. Who are those 3-star recruits that are going to shine like 5 stars once they get in here? What kind of offense are we running? What kind of defense are we running? Who is the best fit? There's so many things that go into just getting the right people in the building. And then once they're in the building from a strength conditioning aspect, how are you utilizing that technology to get those players where they need to be? For example, if you have a 6'6" tight end and you know that at his weight, if he was to put on 25 pounds and get his front squat, he increases front squat to over 50 pounds, he's going to be able to play the way that he needs to play and be successful from our historical data. Now we can go and look at, okay, how did we actually do that? How did we leverage the technology to actually put this player in a position to be successful? Because another big thing is the tenures right now, especially at college football, they look different. Strength conditioning staffs no longer have 3 to 4 years to really develop a player. Those kids are in there for maybe 12 to 18 months now with the transfer portal. So how do you maximize their time when they're in there? It's not just having fancy shiny equipment. It's knowing how to leverage that equipment with historical data and present data to get the best probable outcome of what you want him to be in the future. So I think knowing how to use it, having those right people in there is what's going to be the difference between two of the same teams using the same tech stack.
Awesome. And for your technology, could you kind of let us into a little bit about what Recon Sports does in that element, right? Because I feel like we talked a little bit about data, what data means to organizations, what data means to these, to to the different teams, all the way down to the individual player, right? But how does Recon Sports kind of show up in those environments?
So the staffs are able to communicate at a whole different level. Without Recon Sports, a lot of teams, when they communicate, they're asking for information. If I'm a head coach, if I'm a player personnel guy, I'm going to all my departments and I'm asking for information without Recon Sports. With Recon Sports and having this interconnected system, this operating platform, I now have clarity into all of my silos. And instead of going and asking for information and having a 2 hour conversation just to bring me up to speed, I have a system to where I have visibility into every silo. And now instead of going and asking for information, I get to go ask for answers now. Hey, why are we red across the board in this area? Why are all of our D linemen, why do all of them off the charts in off the field issues? So now that I know that, I can go figure out what's causing it, how to put resources around it to help it get better, and we're able to move the needle that much more every single day when it comes to player recruiting. How are we getting the right guys in here? Player development, how are we developing them once we're here? And player retainment, how are we retaining our best athletes, our top players, to make sure that they can produce on the field? So when you're able to communicate at a completely different level, it's it's a game changer. And another key component into why I'm able to be successful in this is I'm not going to these teams and being like, hey, here's what I thought of, here's how you should communicate.
Hmm.
Here's what other teams are doing, here's how you should communicate. I'm coming in there with a skill set and a system that is adaptable to every single staff. Because every single staff's going to be asking for different answers. Every single staff is going to want different information feeding those answers. So if you can come in and build a system around them to not only make their life easier because they're not having to do hours of Excel or data engineering, any of that nonsense. They can focus on their subject matter expertise and thrive in that role. And now everyone in that organization is operating at that level. Man,
Man,
man, it's
I
night and
mean,
day.
that's powerful. It's so, like, I know you can't speak to like your exact clients. I'm not gonna ask you to do that. Out of respect for the clients and out of respect for the fact that I may go back to school and want to be picked up and drafted onto one of those teams. But has there been a moment where you would say like you really saw the data kind of make a difference? Because what you just mentioned is spot on, and I see it. I mean, I think it's in software in general, but especially when you have a robust software that is doing so many different things and pulling from so many different places. Because with T1V, even with what we do, it's hard at times to demo the product because everyone is going to have a different value proposition for why our technology makes sense. And every team is going to have a totally different way of going about not only how they analyze data, but what data is important to them, and then also how they action that data, right? Who are they sharing that data with? And ultimately, I think that you can't. It's impossible to say one size fits all, especially with a product like the ones that we deliver. But yeah, so has there been a time that you can kind of think of that you can see like very clearly, okay, the data made a difference here,
You big
and
time,
what was that special time?
big time. So there was a player who was a highly recruited player coming into college, and they just weren't getting the output that they needed from him. Heavy discipline issues, off the field issues, and the coaching staff and everyone in the building kind of thought that it was a discipline problem. When the player development director that was in charge of trying to fix this now we started including every single variable from how far away from home is he? Where does he want to be in 5 years? What are his motivations? How's his body weight compared to his goals? We're looking at all of this, and he was able to pinpoint, hey, this guy is living he's from the other side of the country. He's 3,000 miles away from home. His motivations, his affirmations, his mentality is all family oriented. So he put two and two together that, hey, this guy is just out of his element. It's not a discipline issue. He's just out of his element. He misses home. He has no friends or family over here on the other side of the country now. Can we put a support system around him now that maybe involves his family a little bit more? Maybe we make sure that he goes home when we're off. He goes and sees home. Maybe we fly the family out from time to time. And once we made that shift, it was a night and day difference with this player, to the point 2 years later, at the end of his college career, he was drafted to the second round in last year's draft. So if he would have just slipped through the cracks, oh, this is just a discipline problem, can't show up, we're coaching him like we're coaching a group of people, being able to be very individualized, identify the problem, create resources to fix the problem, and now tell the coaching staff, hey, this is when you're coaching him, this is what he wants to be. This is where he wants to be in 5 years. His mentor, his champion in his brain is Kobe Bryant. When you're sitting down with him, talk to him like you'd be talking to if Kobe Bryant was talking to him. And that's a big difference between if his champion is mom or dad. Maybe we got to get mom or dad on the phone more and talk to the player. That's one of my favorite stories, and seeing that athlete get drafted in the second round. Me and the player development director, we called each other that night and we were just like, man, let's go.
That's special, man. That's special. I think that's like very clearly a moment where data changed everything, and instinct could have clearly gotten that wrong because, our biases exist in our own minds. And sometimes if you really are intentional about interpreting the data, I'm not going to say there's still no bias, right? But it leaves a very clear trail as to like these are the things that can happen that can make change. And that's an amazing story. Like that's a life-changing story, not just for the player who was drafted, which is amazing. That's ultimately the goal, right? Is to put these players in the best position to win, whether that's optimizing the athlete so that they don't get injured as often, or exactly what you said, player development and getting them to that next level. But it's life changing for the organization because it opens their eyes to the possibilities. Because in many ways, the institution, the university, is a factory for creating a great person. And sports is a part of, I think, especially for me at least, it's a part of what shaped me as an individual. I approach everything, even in the corporate world, like a corporate athlete. You know what I mean? I still keep my drive, my discipline that I gained from sports. But with technology like this and the ability to develop a player in that way, the institution becomes, in my opinion, from an athlete standpoint, that's where I would want to be. I would want to be at an institution that could develop me in that way. And that's why some of the bigger schools get some of the best athletes because it's not even sometimes the data. It's like, well, I can get the most exposure here. I got a better chance of getting to the league, right? Data takes it now and says, well, we can actually develop you to get you to the league. We may not have the marketing budget, but we have the tools and technology to make you great. And if you could deliver that story to the players, I mean, your recruiting uptick is just insane. So there's all types of benefits that I can think of from what you said. And then when we talk about your product or your technology, like all of this data kind of it lives somewhere, right? So who actually owns it and how does that operation kind of work within your platform?
So the teams own the data 100%, and lives and is stored directly on the university. That was one of the big things that before I got into college, and when the school reached out to me, they were like, "Hey, we don't want to log into another platform. We want to log in with our university ID and leverage the licenses that the university is already paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for every year. Why would it make sense for us to increase our license costs to go to an outside platform, have all of our data stored there, intermingled with our opponent's data, and who knows who's seeing it? So the university controls the data 100%. They have access, and it's every workflow, every report, every dashboard lives within their environment, and they just license the IP of our system. The core of what we do is not necessarily a technology. It's more so a system that can be plugged into any technology of your choosing. The question is how, as a head coach, another story I'll share is as a head coach, when we're doing player exit interviews and I'm meeting one-on-one with each player, I have all these departments that are now handing me different packets. I get a packet from training room, a packet from player personnel, a packet from strength conditioning. Now, as a head coach of a top 25 school, I have to synthesize all of this information is in different formats for 105 guys. Now we've basically took all of those departments, they're in one house now because of the system that we have. And now instead of having 5 different sheets, 5 different formats, the head coach has one sheet with 5 different sections on it, formatted exactly how he wants it, so we can look at it and have a conversation. Just just that mental load, that time back that that head coach gets just in that one segment is game changing, let alone for the whole year. So when you think about being able to take a system, plug it into your interface, your software, whatever you want to run as an organization, I mean, and now every department's talking to each other, everything's in one place, and we haven't even talked about how this is going to be game changing for AI. Because AI
Right.
is not, it's not really it's obviously very prevalent in our lives and we see it on commercials all the time. But is it there? Can it do really what it says it could do? Not yet. But if you're getting to the point in AI where you're asking an AI to go into every single silo and compile all of the data and systematize it just so you can start asking it questions, as opposed to having an infrastructure to where every single data point within our organization is flowing through this process and landing in one spot. And now we're plugging those 50 million data points into our AI of choice. Man,
Yeah, I mean that's powerful. That's powerful. And we're seeing more organizations building environments where the data isn't static, right? It's layered and compared, like it's layered, it's compared, it's manipulated in real time, and it's almost like a strategic command center. You know what I mean? And so, do you think like the physical environment influences decision making? And what would you think like the kind of command center of the future of college sports would look like? I know it's a
man,
bit
I
of broad
remember
question.
No, I remember I took a tour of football facility a couple years ago, and their war room was just like elite. What you see on TV and like kind of what you think about when you envision that, like elite. And it's not just a projector on the wall. It's not everyone kind of taking turns and then hey, everyone send your slides to this one person, and now we have a slide deck, and it's all interactive, it's all there, it's all live. Different people have access to it. But seeing a demo of your guys' product yesterday was like, especially coming from an army background, or what I just said of send your slides to one person. Now they got to compile it on a PowerPoint, and now it's on the projector, and now it's next and next, and it's just static. And then seeing what you had to offer yesterday in our demo, I was like, man, this is the future. This is what every single wall in our war room should be right now. With because not just because it looks cool or it's fancy or it's fast, but because everyone can put their imprint on it. There's no downtime of saying, "Hey, let me send you my slides." It's, "Hey, you can literally cast your phone to this big screen right here and now brief right off of that. And you don't even have to be in the room if someone's out recruiting a player or someone's out of the building, and they could literally Zoom, come into the war room from their phone and show what they're looking at, speak to what they're looking at. I mean, just if you're going against a team that has that and you don't have that, it's just a matter of time before they blow you out of the water.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's true. Decisions are being made in a different capacity. The decision makers are thinking about approaching data differently, and it's really hard to compete. And in order to compete in the future, what teams look like tomorrow, what sports analytics looks like tomorrow, I don't know, right? You have this emergence of AI, you have digital twins, you have all of these different things that are coming, that are entering in other industries, but are very much capable of making a really big impact in pro sports, college sports, sports in general. And it's just exciting to kind of see where everything is going, right? And I'm sure from your seat, you know what I mean? You're in the locker rooms, you're in these environments with the different coaches and teams. I'm sure you can see the impact in real time in a way that most others really can't, right? And that's what I think makes Recon Sports unique. That's what makes your profile, your platform, and your technology unique because you come from that background. You've been on the athlete side. You've been at a top performing university, and you're a technologist. That, first of all, is a very unique combination of skill set, experience, and just overall knowledge of the game. But man, I think that your technology, the teams that are utilizing your technology, are obviously on the winning side of this thing. I know that you're going to stay abreast to all of the technology that's out there and information, and bring that into your platform, and very much like we are here at T1B. And I just want to say, man, I think that this conversation just highlights that technology is accelerating, the data is expanding, but alignment at its core is still human, right? Because all the cool technology that you have and what your platform brings, all that we have and what our platform brings, it still comes down to the human and the human side of sports in general, right? And I think you can never get away from that. And that's the beauty of it. But at the end of the day, the teams that win just don't have better information. They have better, integration. They integrate that information better. And that's I think the power of Recon Sports. And if I'm wrong, you know what I mean, let me know. But it's
Spot
it's
on.
it's it's also what we do here at T1V. And so thank you so much for coming in. Like I said, nothing meaningful gets built alone. So I appreciate you for coming here and joining me on Built Together. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Danny Davis, Recon Sports. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, and where can people find you if they're looking for your
Yeah,
profile?
reconsports.com is our website. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I try to post a lot about just data background and giving people some insight and some tips and tricks because like I said, your school, your work is already paying for these licenses. You just don't know how to leverage it and don't know how to use it. So I try to give tips and tricks on how to leverage that technology, like things like Power BI and advanced Excel, or just how to integrate different systems on an individual basis. So on LinkedIn, you can find me, Danny Davis, reconsports.com, get Recon Sports on Instagram and X. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much, man. Again, it's a pleasure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Built Together. I'm your host, Xavier Killer Kelly, and we will see you next time.